Okay, I'm gonna record this for our friends in New Zealand that's asked for this to be recorded. So hello, everyone. Hopefully you see this on YouTube in a few days. Thanks everyone for joining. It's a small group, so I'm happy to kind of make this more of a discussion as opposed to me just talking at you the entire time. So I'd say feel free to interrupt me with any questions or feedback or comments as I go through the presentation. I also have Dom here who can answer questions in the chat. Or more technical questions if you have any. In addition to that, if you have any further questions after the discussion and presentation, you can email me directly at josh@scite.ai. You can tweet at us at Scite. And then we also have a special coupon for joining the webinar, which you can use for individual plans, which is Scite_webinar_September. And that's valid off any of our plans, 30% off monthly or annual. And so thanks to all that have joined, and thanks to everyone that said hello in the chat. It's nice to have some kind of interaction as opposed to a few black boxes. The way that I like to generally start my talks and to share Scite is to kind of take a step back, because I think most people on these calls are either involved with publishing or with librarianship. And oftentimes, we get bogged down in kind of our day-to-day work, and we can forget that what we're doing, is really impactful and quite important. And so, to me, science and research in general is really quite amazing. It's given us the ability to have these conversations virtually, to have life-saving vaccines. I've been showing this slide pre-pandemic and now post-pandemic, and it feels, even more true. It informs, policies, how we raise our children. All these different things are informed by research, and that's quite remarkable. And so, as you're going through the citation counts and impact factors and things like this, it's good to remember that behind all that, is amazing research that's going to be around after all of us are gone, and that's quite remarkable. At the same time, there's a lot of information. So there's about 2 papers being published every minute just in PubMed. And so if you look at all literature, it's about double that. And it's probably even more now as this is a couple years out of date, that quote. And then in addition to the massive amount of information that we're dealing with, there's been studies from nonprofit initiatives as well as large pharmaceutical companies looking at reproducibility and finding challenges there. And so Scite was really aimed at making research more reliable, not just necessarily accelerating, research, but really trying to say, here's this amazing thing that we're doing as humans. How can we make sure it's more reliable? How can we better understand it? And how can we better interpret it and utilize it? And so today I'm going to walk through a short demo of how Scite can help you, how it can help you look at individual articles, how it can help you look at researchers, and then how we have created kind of these next generation of citations and what that opens up beyond traditional bibliometrics. And so the way that I like to show Scite is to show the world as it exists without Scite, and then to show it through the lens of Scite. And so I should have maybe introduced myself. My name is Josh Nicholson, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Scite. I also have a background in cell biology, so I finished a PhD about 6 years ago. And this is the main study coming out of that degree. I did my PhD at Virginia Tech. We collaborated with the hospital in Portugal as well as the lab at the NIH. My work was published in eLife. It's been cited 54 times according to them, and then viewed over 12,000 times. And so I highlight these different things because this is what we all kind of look at when we first look at a publication. Where is it published? Is this a prestigious journal? Do I know this journal? Do I trust this journal? Who are the authors? Same types of questions. Do I know any of them? Where are they from? Are they from institutions that I know, that I trust? And then some metrics. How many times has this work been cited? How many times has this work been viewed? Number of annotations, number of tweets, things like this. This is starting to become more diverse. I would say in this world, these are used pretty superficially. So we glance at a citation number or views and make a snap judgment. So if it's thousands, we'll say this is highly cited. If it's 54, maybe it's moderately cited. If it's 0, maybe it's early. And so most people today are not really digging into this number. They're glancing at it. Maybe they'll click through. And if you click through, maybe you'll see something like Scopus or PubMed or Web of Science, and you'll see a list of citing articles. Here, again, maybe you'll open 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, but in general, you're not going to open every single article to look at what these 56 documents have cited, just because that's a massive amount of work. And that, I think, is kind of the missed opportunity that we're trying to address. Behind these 56 documents could be very relevant information. By definition, they're related to my work. Maybe some of them are providing important context, important nuance, important interpretation. Maybe some of them have looked at the same claim that I make and either support it or call it into question. You don't really know that unless you are an expert in this field and reading everything, or you're opening every single article that cites it. And that is, again, hours of work just to even look at kind of 56 documents. And so with Scite, we want to change the conversation to really show how work has been cited as opposed to just how many times it's been cited. And so we have a browser extension that is available for Chrome, Firefox, Safari, even Microsoft Edge, that will show you our citation information virtually anywhere you're reading a research article online. And so here you can see it on eLife. You can see it next to each individual reference there. And then you can also see it on the sidebar. And this browser extension will show you the number of paper citations. So this traditional number is what you think of when you think of a citation, 63 papers citing this work. And then the breakdown of citation statements. So how many provide supporting evidence, how many are mentioning it, and how many provide contrasting evidence. And so what you can do is not just glance at this, but you can click it, and it'll bring you over to Scite. And what you'll see up top is basically the same metadata as the version of record. So the title, the authors, everything is linked by DOI. So it'll go back to the full text. And then you can see an abstract where we have it. And then if you scroll down, you'll start to see something that looks similar to traditional citation indices, but is different because we're showing the citation context. And so here is a work that was published 3 years after mine in Molecular Biology of the Cell. Here is this excerpt of text that comes from this full text, coming from the results section. And you can simply read, what does it say about this work that I'm interested in? And so in this case, it says, in agreement with previous work, and then cites Nicholson et al., 2015, the trisomic clone showed similar aberrations, albeit to a lesser extent, supplemental figure S2B. And so this work is indicating that they're providing supporting evidence to the citation of my work. And so we have classified that using a deep learning model that looks at this at scale. So we have over 900 million of these citation statements. In order to actually, provide these different citation types, we have machine learning that looks at the citation statements and makes that judgment. And I'll get a bit more deeper into how we do that, but I'll also point you to this paper that really describes Scite in details. If you go to Scite and go to resources, we have a paper that was published recently in QSS that will talk about all of this in much more detail than I'll get into in this talk. And so how do we do this before going on? So how do we get this excerpt of text and then provide the citation type and the sections? So as it may be apparent, we need access to full text articles. And so we utilize open access sources such as PubMed Central, but increasingly we partner with publishers directly. And so to date, we've partnered with over a dozen different publishers to gain access to content that is not freely available. And if you go to the homepage, you can see a list of these publishers like Rockefeller University Press, BMJ, Wiley, Cambridge University Press, Sage. And we have some big ones in the works, which will enhance this. We generally get content in PDF or XML. And when we get a content like that, we need to extract out these in-text citations and the text around that. And so to do that, we utilize an open source tool called Grobid, which involves a lot of machine learning. In fact, 11 different machine learning models with 20 to 30 different features each. And here's a visual representation of what this looks like. And so this PDF, you can see next to each blue box is identifying the in-text citation. It matches that to the reference in the reference section, takes that reference string, and then matches that against cross-ref metadata. And so this is not easy because, as you can probably appreciate, many PDFs are structured differently. There's many different citation styles. There's many different reference styles. And so in order to do this at scale, there's a lot of technical challenge that goes into that. And it's not perfect. And so here it looks like we've gotten everything. But if you actually look more closely, there's one that is missing, which I can't see right now. Here it is. So here's one where we didn't identify this. In XML, we generally get all references, but again, a lot of times this is done by humans, and we'll have some errors in itself. And so this is the way that we grab out this citation context is from this system. Once we have that text, we have a target sentence, so the one sentence identifying the citation, and then the sentence before and the sentence after. We then have a deep learning model that tries to classify that as, does this statement provide supporting or contrasting evidence, or does it mention it? And the way that we've trained that deep learning model was to look at roughly 50,000 citation statements as experts, so members of the team, either MDs or PhDs, and to read them and say, okay, these authors are indicating that they support this and that they also have evidence. And we've done that from a diversity of different disciplines. And then that has gone to feed this deep learning model. We then have a holdout set of roughly 10,000 citation statements that attempts to be basically a good reflection of the literature without, oversampling in these things that we can test this against for precision and recall. And so, while this is quite good at this stage, it's never going to be perfect because it's exceedingly difficult in the way that scientists write, as well as all the different, scientific notation and sentence segmentation and the challenges with that. And so once we have gotten the full text article, extracted out the citation statement, we then make it available on Scite. And if you come back to this report, you can see that it's broken down into these citation statements and it's organized by these different things. And so I've already shown that here you can see that this provides supporting evidence. And this has been used by this fancy deep learning model. But what else can you do around the citation context? So in addition to filtering based on supporting, mentioning, or contrasting, you can also organize by the year of paper citing this. So you can see recent citations. You can organize it by the paper section. So where do the citations come from the citing papers? And this I find to be very useful for understanding work. And so we have a lot of students using Scite, and a lot of them will utilize this filter to look at the results section or the discussion section, because in the results section or the discussion section, you're going to see a comparison, or you're going to see some interpretation and extra nuance. And so I think this is a good way to kind of look at, what have other experts or other researchers in the field said about this work? How have they interpreted it, and how have they consequently cited it? And so this we're able to do just because generally scientific articles have a semi-defined structure of IMRAD, introduction, methods, results, and discussion. And then where we can't reliably match it, we just bump that down to kind of other sections. And so this goes beyond just saying, is this paper supported or contrasted? It really provides extra context and really helps with understanding. And so you can now look at virtually, any research paper that we have citation information for, which is 40 plus million at this point, and see how has it been cited in the literature. And that can be helpful to better understanding anything kind of very quickly, and really almost viewing these citation statements as a conversation. In addition to this, we also have the publication type. So is it an article citing this work? Is it a preprint or is it a book? This is pretty basic. Obviously, this gets much more granular, but for now, we've just broken it up into these big categories. We then identify if there's a self-citation or not. This is pretty basic, I should say. So it's really looking at this where we're very confident in it and not trying to do too much, because at some point name disambiguation can be quite challenging. You can also see who has cited this work the most. And so here you can see two different authors that is actually the same author, but differentiated by this accent. This is my PhD advisor, and then this was a collaborator of ours. You can see which journals cite this work. So maybe you want to find a place to publish that's related to this. And then you can also visualize the citation network. And so if you visualize this, it'll open up, and by default, it hides the mentioning sites, but it will show the citation to and from my work. And so here is my paper in the middle. Here is a paper that provides supporting evidence. So this is green. If you click on that edge, you'll see what it says over here. And then if you want to see what I say about other work, you can click on the edge and see that here. And so it's really looking at a conversation amongst these papers and seeing which are providing supporting evidence and which are contrasting. The size of the node relates to the number of citations coming into that. And you can select that and actually expand the network and see multiple papers at once. And you can choose to show mentioning citations, but that will quickly make it very hard to interpret. We provide various filters and things like this. And I think this is kind of our first step at looking at a visualization of citations. I think there's a lot more potential here that we can utilize by looking at networks and providing, better clustering and things like this. But this is a nice way to kind of see what we've shown on the report page here. And so maybe I'll pause here for a second. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. Or maybe I can look in the chat and just answer some too. For citing authors, do you pick first? So here's one question in the chat and says, for citing authors, do you pick first, last, show all authors on citing papers, etc.? So we generally show all authors on citing papers. And so you can expand that if you click the et al and see fewer or less. And in some cases, with huge author lists, it will become quite unruly, especially in the physics citations. But obviously it's important to show all authors, so we're showing that. And then on self-citations, it's really any position. So a shared authorship position, we're calling a self-citation. And I know that can be defined in different ways, where it can be just a first author self-citation or a last author self-citation. But right for now, we've just included any shared author position amongst that. And again, we're very restrictive in that. So we want to be confident as opposed to, giving false positives. So in addition to looking at, how a research paper has been cited, we also show how researchers have been cited. And so you can click on a researcher's names. And so here is Aaron Mattingly, which was an undergrad in our lab while I was there. He then went on to do a PhD at UCSF. You can see how they've been cited, also how they cite others. And so I think there's a lot more that can be done here to show not just how someone's been cited and the number of citations, and it's always going up, but other types of things like how many open access articles have they cited, how many times were they the first to cite a paper, all these kind of fun things that I think can help authors better understand their citation patterns and maybe improve this work. And then also understand, how critical they are, and are they just only supporting work, or are they also, showing differences in the field. You can then organize this and see, what is the most cited paper, the most supported published paper, and then you can go deeper on any of these things. In addition to this, you can click on the affiliations to see the affiliation dashboard. You can also click on the journals to see the journal dashboard. And so really, we brought our view on citations, the citation context, really kind of everywhere citations are today. So looking at articles, looking at people, looking at journals, affiliations, and things like this. And so here is a journal dashboard looking at EMBO molecular medicine. You can see that there's roughly 1,600 articles. Here's the breakdown of the citation types. And so most are mentioning in our system, then supporting, and then contrasting. And again, it's important to emphasize that this is supporting with evidence or contrasting with evidence, not just positive or negative sentiment. And I think there can be confusion around that sometimes, because sometimes people will talk negatively about a study, but right now we want a higher bar to look at, does this provide supporting or contrasting evidence? The number of editorial notices, so retractions, withdrawals, errata, and things like that. We get our retractions from Crossref as well as PubMed. And then we've also done some extra work ourselves to do some title detection to enrich those sources. And so we have a paper that we are getting ready to probably preprint and submit soon that talks about that process, and that will ultimately make that data available to everyone, because I think retractions should be as freely available and used in every system as easily as possible. In addition to that, we also have a simple kind of metric to look at, overall, has this journal received more supporting or contrasting citations than another journal? And we call that the Cite index, and it's really just a simple ratio looking at the number of supporting citations over supporting plus contrasting cites. And so it's from 0 to 1. And actually, if you look at all journals, you'll see a normal distribution, and Dom has a preprint on that, which he can maybe link to in the chat, or you guys can email us and he can provide some more information around that. And you can look at that across different times, across different time windows, and then also see how it fits within the subject area. So how does it rank within this? And this is really intended to not be this metric that everyone says this is the best journal, but to provide a complementary view on journals to the impact factor. And again, not to just say how many times has this been cited, but what do those citations look like? If you scroll down, you'll see who has published the most in this paper. And again, you can click on these names and open up the research profiles to see that work. And then you can also scroll down and see the articles within that. By default, it will show the most supporting citation, but say you're interested in the most supporting citation with no contrasting citations, you can do that and then filter there. And then you can also say, I want to see the most recent one where there's, at least one supporting citation. And so this is a better way to kind of look at any journal and quickly see, what is some recent work published there, what is work that's being supported, what is work that's being contrasted, etc. Looks like there's another conversation. Oh, Don. So this is a journal dashboard. As I mentioned, we also have the ability to look at affiliation dashboards. So why don't we try and open this article, and then we can highlight. Let's try to highlight. Well, we can open this. And so if you come to product, you have the ability to look at our journal list, and you can search any journal there and look there. You can also click it directly from the article that you're looking at or the site report. You can also do that with affiliations. And so this should have thousands of different universities as well as companies. And then we also have funder dashboards, and they're all basically the same dashboard organized into these different subject areas. And so here's the Weizmann Institute of Science. Here's the total number of articles, the breakdown of those citations, again, editorial notices, site index. We're not showing ranking here. And then the authors who's published the most in that. And again, a table looking at articles from this. And you can filter by these different things. I should also note that next to each article and dashboards, the ability to set an email alert that will allow you to receive an email when there's new citations or new publications to these different subjects or topics that you care about. And so up until this point, I have mostly talked about how has an article been cited, how has an affiliation been cited, such as a university, how has a journal been cited. And so these are pretty well-defined areas. But say you're interested in a specific topic like chromosome missegregation, and you want to see, sorry, I can't type and talk very well. You want to see this information according to our metrics. So you can search, and we have two different searches. So I'm first showing our search to search papers. So if you search chromosome missegregation using our paper search, we will match that topic or whatever you've searched on the title or the abstract. And so this is pretty traditional, looking at the same type of search that like a PubMed will do. But then what you can do differently is say, okay, I want to see the most supported research in chromosome missegregation or in this field or this topic or whatever you're interested in. And so you can restrict that. And then you can order by relevance. You can order by the most citations, the most recent work, and things like that. And then in addition to this, you can also see who has published the most according to whatever criteria I've set. So Don Cleveland has the most articles that have at least 5 supporting citations mentioning chromosome missegregation in the title of the abstract. And that's maybe not so surprising because he's a National Academy member and he's a very prolific author. Maybe you want to see earlier career researchers that are not, kind of these giants in the field. What you can do is restrict that to earlier, to more recent publications using our year filter, and again, then find, more recent publications. And so this is a way to quickly kind of find, leaders, emerging leaders, who is published and who has discussed the most on this topic. And it doesn't just have to be looking for the most supporting. You can also look for, maybe the most discussed. And maybe these are the really interesting papers where you'll see supporting and contrasting work. And so if you bring these back and say, okay, I just want to see chromosome segregation papers. Well, let's clear this one and say any field. So I want to see chromosome segregation papers with at least 1 supporting citation. You can do that. And then from this is not just a way to look at the results here, you can save this. So you can set email alerts for new citations to these 488 publications or new publications matching the certain criteria. So this is a good way to look at a subject, a topic, and then stay on top of it via alerts. And then you can also create a dashboard that will basically show you the same information that I showed previously in these predefined areas. Will allow you to create these custom dashboards based on your topic of interest. And so you hit create dashboard. It'll take, sometimes a minute or two, depending upon the size of this dashboard. And then you can see that information in aggregate, explore the different authors there, and then explore the different articles there. And so this is great for kind of starting to look at a new area or to keep track of different areas that you're interested in to better understand it and then better stay on top of it. Again, by setting, these different alerts so that you'll get emails when there's new information added around this, either a new publication or a new citation for that. And so this is, quite useful for different students starting out their research and really doing lit reviews. It's also useful for large companies looking at different drugs that they want to track or different diseases that they want to track. It's really kind of useful for saying, I want to go beyond just an individual article into a group of articles, and I want to define them in this way, either by the topic or by the citation metrics or by date or authors or whatever is most important to you. There's a couple more things, and then, I'd love to make it more of a discussion. And so in addition to showing journals, affiliations, and funders, we also have the ability to create a dashboard just by simply uploading a list of DOIs. And so you can copy and paste that list of DOIs from another citation tool, from PubMed, from your own records to create a custom dashboard. You can also sync your Zotero library or your Mendeley library to upload your references and see that information. I'll also point you to the fact that we have a Zotero plugin. So if you want to see our numbers directly within Zotero, you can do that. That's freely available. And hopefully that helps you cite with an S before you cite with a C. And so most of everything that I've shown has related to looking at how articles that are already published have been cited. And so we've had a lot of discussions with editorial teams and say, this is great. But a lot of my challenges, not just editorial teams, but also with research, a lot of my challenges come before this. And so obviously reading is very, tightly linked to writing, but we've also developed a tool called the reference check that utilizes our information to help authors, editors, peer reviewers, really anyone look at the references of a manuscript, both of an unpublished manuscript or a published manuscript. And so the way that I like to demonstrate this is to look at this Frontiers article that was published in November of 2020 and to download that and check the references. And so this can work again with a published document, but it's really designed for working with an unpublished document pre-publication or with a preprint. And so if you grab that PDF and come over to Scite, what you can do is go to the reference check. And again, you can upload a PDF or a docx document. And so what we're doing here now is what we do millions of times with published documents. So we're automatically identifying the in-text citations, matching that to the reference, and then matching that against metadata from Crossref, and then matching that against our citation and editorial information. And so what this will show you in a second is here is reference 1 from this PDF. How has it been cited? Has it been contrasted? Has it been retracted? Has it been supported? Or what have others said about this work that I'm citing more generally? Let's give this another minute. You can click to see this here. And so this reference check, which will look a bit like the Scite report, has a few key differences. So up top, we show how many references we are able to detect and extract from that. And so in this case, there's 39 references. In our system, we're only looking at articles that have a DOI. So maybe there's a reference to a newspaper. We are not able to detect that and extract that and show that right now. And then we show the number of references with some editorial concern. Has it been retracted and things like this? In this case, it's published. We are able to also extract out the metadata. But again, this will work with an unpublished document and is really aimed at helping authors, make sure that their foundations, their reference of their article is what they think it is. And so if you scroll down, here's the different references. Here's how they've been cited according to our system. And then here is some editorial information. And so here is how that PDF references this work. And so if you expand this, this information is now coming from the PDF that we upload, and we try to make this visually distinct from our citation statements, which is coming from citing articles. And so in this case, this reference from seen to being, subliminal social comparisons affect implicit and explicit self-evaluations, was published in 2004 and was actually retracted. And so maybe that's okay because they're citing this and they know it's retracted and they're discussing the retraction. So if you expand this, you can see that information and see if that's true. So in this case, it says, second, life satisfaction can be influenced by objective social context through a more unconscious path with little conscious attention or monitoring. And then they cite Diedrich, Stoppel, and Blanton. So this work was actually retracted in 2013. And so here is a paper in 2020 citing a work that's been retracted for nearly 8 years. And so this is a problem that has been documented in many different studies. And in fact, there's studies showing that that about 95% of citations to retracted articles post-retraction are unaware of the retraction. So they're citing it unknowingly. And that makes sense because a lot of times researchers are working with PDFs, and PDFs are not automatically getting updated with new information. And so we want to help publishers curb this problem to make sure that they're not unintentionally citing retracted articles. And so we've tied in this reference check into major submission systems, such as Editorial Manager, Scholar One, Manuscript Manager, and we're working on integrating this into EJP right now to make this part of the submission process so that it's run in the background, very similar to kind of like a plagiarism detection check. And so this is obviously something that, it shouldn't happen, right? You shouldn't cite this work. It's likely fraudulent and can no longer be trusted. What about other cases? So here's a reference that has been cited 95 times, supported 3 times, and then contrasted 2 times. That doesn't mean that this paper should be removed, but if you spent years of your life, doing this research, maybe writing up this work, maybe it's important to see what do those other, what have others said about this work that you've cited? So again, you can see how this has been cited. You can also click this badge and then see what do those contrasting citation statements say. And so in this case, this one says this result contradicts the findings of Schwartz and Hartford, 2007. And then there's another one that says contrary to previous findings that especially the poor, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a quick way to kind of look at others that have maybe supported or challenged the claim to maybe enrich your article, change how you cite articles, and really kind of improve your understanding of how others have cited the same references you have. And so it's not as black or white that this is good or bad because it has supporting or contrasting, and we never want to really say that. But it will provide you this extra nuance and context that can really help improve your own writing or help improve writing that you're maybe potentially reviewing. And so maybe let me pause there before showing one last thing and see if there's any questions. So there's one question: how are social sciences and humanities represented in Scite in comparison with experimental sciences? So that's a good question. So in general, we want to look at all research. And so humanities as well as, STEM. And I think the main value of Scite is the context. So showing the citation context, and generally that will work and provide this extra information across different disciplines very equally. However, if you start to look at citation types, different fields, this will have more value and make more sense than others. So does this provide supporting evidence? Maybe is much more commonly used in biomedical science than humanities. So this is actually, somewhat of an empirical question, and I think there's more research to be done on this that will look at, the incidence of supporting or contrasting citations in different fields, and then look at that, both into how it actually occurs, so the actual incidence, and then also how we're able to detect that. So we also have a very, kind of rough analysis looking at this where we looked at the Scite Journal Index. So this is a graph from about a year ago and is probably out of date, but I think still holds true. And so what we looked at was the Scite Index, which again is just supporting citations over supporting plus contradicting versus the impact factor. And we didn't see a relationship there. But then why I show this is we broke this down by different subject areas to see, okay, does math have more supporting citations than, say, clinical medicine? And what we found, I think, is, pretty reassuring to our approach, and also, makes sense. And so math, there's a high volume of supporting citation statements. Same with physical, chemical, and earth sciences. And then it starts to become, more spread out as you get into social and behavioral sciences, as well as clinical medicine. And I think that is representative of these fields where, there's only kind of so much contrasting evidence you can have in math. I think it's also a reflection a bit of how different scientists write. And so, there are very shared commonalities in how researchers cite work. And so oftentimes it'll say, in support or in contrast, and then it'll have totally different subjects. But I think it's a mixture of the reflection of the different fields and the actual incidence of supporting and contrasting citation statements, as well as how authors write. And I think there's some work for us to actually break down how much that is, but it's not an easy project, I should say. It's not so difficult. It's more so just time consuming. I think this is also important to show because, these journals do very well according to the Scite index, but oftentimes have, very low impact factors. And so this is a way, again, to kind of look at different journals across different fields and to say, not everything is about all citations in the total count. We can start to look at citations in a different way. And so thanks for that. And again, I think the main thing that we provide is the citation context, and then we provide a lot of different ways to search that context to provide better ways of finding the relevant snippets of text. And that can be our deep learning model, which gets a lot of attention, but it can also be a simple search where you can search these, and then it can be sections and things like this. And so one thing that comes to mind with this that hasn't been brought up as a question is, do you have everything, right? So you need access to full text publications. You've talked about 12 different publishers. What about content that you don't have? And so that is one thing that we've care a lot about is having good coverage, and we do have quite good coverage at this point. We have 26 million. We've extracted 900 million plus citation statements from 26 million full text articles, but we don't have everything. And so where we don't have the citation context, we do show a traditional citation here. And so what you can see here is these citations that come from Crossref, and that allows us to have a very comprehensive citation record from Crossref, as well as our own citation graph. And so this puts us really on par with traditional citation indices like Dimension, Scopus, and Web of Science. And then obviously, where we have 900 million citation statements, and these other groups are currently not showing any citation statements, although Web of Science is now starting to explore this a little bit. You can also explore references and see that information, which I haven't shown. And so one last thing, which I'll show before making this more of a discussion and hopefully having some more questions, is a new citation statement search that we released only a few weeks ago. And this really takes advantage of this new data that we have and allows you to not just search by title and abstract, but to search basically our entire database to find kind of expert analyses, opinions, interpretations on virtually any topic. And so say you're interested, say you're a student writing an essay on rent rise in Williamsburg, which is where I'm based, you can search that, and this will search the citation statements and will show you the information directly. And so here is a search for Williamsburg rent rise. It matches on rent, Williamsburg rent, and then rent rise. And you can simply see this paper is what they're saying about this. So it says rents on Bedford Avenue rose by 224% between 2003 and 2007, while rents on nearby Graham Avenue, which is where I am, increased by 158%. And so this is a quick way to find and really kind of ask the literature a question. And as opposed to just getting a list of 20, 30, 50, or hundreds of articles and having to open all of these, a lot of them you can kind of find the information that you need. You also can find where that comes from. So this is a source publication. And then you can find articles that it's talking about. So it's citing this. So there's two different articles in this citation statement that are probably relevant to this. But oftentimes you'll see more than that, and you can hover over and find co-citations. And so this is really cool and amazing to not just look at, Williamsburg rent rise, but you can also look at, how does Peppa Pig influence my children? And so you can search that. And it's very amazing because the research, again, how I introduce this is so diverse and touches not just, cancer research, but touches social sciences, touches humanities. And I think this makes it a lot more accessible and understandable, and really kind of allows you to say, what does the research literature say about this? So these are, pretty easy to digest and kind of look at this as a conversation, and to look at what do experts and what is the data and the analyses say about virtually any topic. And so if you want to look at Avastin, you can do that. We've also just very recently added different filters for this. So you can say, I'm interested in Avastin. I want to see who has mentioned Avastin in their methods section. And so here is citation statements mentioning Avastin in the methods section. You can organize if they're supporting or contrasting. You can also say, I want to see, only papers that have at least one supporting citation statement in the methods section. You can filter by journal. You can filter by affiliation. This is a powerful way to kind of better understand topics. You can also input product IDs for, say, antibodies or other reagents and see how others have used it. And you can also see who's published the most on this. So here is a researcher that's published the most on Avastin, at least according to who's published the most in the citations section. And so this is, really kind of a new way of searching. Probably the closest thing to it is Google Scholar, but they're just showing fragmented context. And what we're doing is showing generally the full citation context linked to the citations that they're citing, as well as co-citations. So you can hover over and see other citations there, as well as the source, the authors, the institutions, the journals. And so it's a very powerful way to start a research and to kind of quickly come up to speed on almost any topic. And I think this is useful for a student. It's useful for someone in a hospital trying to better understand, treatments that they're having to make life-changing decisions on, or a family member, or really kind of anyone that needs to understand research better. And one thing that we've done is to not just, make this available on articles, but to bring this to a browser extension and say, are sugar substitutes good for kids? So say you're reading this article in the New York Times, you can highlight this. And if you click, you have the ability to search, to bring this search and to see what does the literature say about this. So what does the literature say about sugar substitutes and for kids? And this can be used for Twitter and different things. And sometimes it'll give an amazing result. Sometimes you'll need to pare this down, but say we want to say sugar substitutes, and let's just go kids. You can do more powerful searches there too, where you really want to restrict it, and then start to see, okay, here is, maybe some of these, maybe you want to look at artificial as well. This is a good way to kind of start to find, so here's, starting to look at kids fed a milk substitute, artificially sweetened beverages for sugar sweetened. This one doesn't have kids. And so this is a good way to kind of start that and to go deeper and find, critical analyses or insights, or really what do kind of experts say about any of this. And so this is, again, quite recent. So we definitely welcome any feedback or questions on this. But I think it's a very powerful way to kind of, not just look at how an article has been cited, but how a topic or how a specific field has been cited, or really kind of any interest. And it works, across the board to look at, artificial sugar studies, Peppa Pig studies, or Williamsburg rent studies as well. And so maybe a few more slides and then I can stop there. One thing that I like to highlight is that, we thought we were, entirely smart and this was our idea. But actually, this has been discussed for quite some time. And so I think, it's always useful to acknowledge the fact that this was not our idea initially, and that people have been talking about kind of this approach that we've developed and brought to fruition for quite some time. And so here is Eugene Garfield, who created Web of Science back in 1964, published an article, Can Citation Indexing Be Automated? And in that article, he talks about citation markers. And he says, these markers would appear in the published citation index along with the usual citation data. And he gives a few examples such as critique, Mr. X is wrong, or my favorite, calamity for mankind. And he says the intelligent machine would examine a new document and generate a critical statement such as rather poor paper. And so this is effectively kind of what we've done. And I think, we are in a lucky stage to be doing it because we were able to start with enough open access content, and we were also able to start with enough technical tools at our disposal to actually bring this to fruition. Because there are millions of documents, and then citations can be made in many different ways, and so it's quite challenging technically to do what we've done. And so I think we're fortunate to be doing it, and I think it's appropriate to acknowledge or to cite previous people that have come before us and how they've done that. And again, I would point you to our paper in QSS that talks about other work on this area and looking at citation analysis and citation statement at smaller scale, where they've looked at thousands or maybe a couple million of different things. And so I'll conclude there. That's an old number, and say, if you have any questions, feel free to email us at hi@scite.ai or tweet at us. Again, if you want to, get a personal license, here's a coupon code for attending this that will give you 30% off. And if you forget that or don't write it down, you can email us and just ask. And I would say thank you, everyone, for your time. And yeah, hopefully we have some discussion and questions. And so you can also turn on your camera and just simply ask. But I'll take a few from the different from the chat. And so here's one question: how can Scite help to analyze institutions and universities? So this is a good question. And so as I mentioned, we have these affiliation dashboards. So I can talk a little bit more about how we've created these. So we have utilized information from Microsoft Academic Graph, which allows us to take all these different identifiers for different institutions and pair our data basically on top of that. And so you can generally see, which institution has the most cites according to ours. So here's Harvard, here's also the NIH, but maybe which has the most supporting citations, again, Harvard, but then it starts to change at Max Planck, and maybe that's a reflection of physical sciences. And really, I think what we provide is, again, a way to look at who has cited who within this institution, and then how have they cited them. And so I think that, it's just kind of one simple step further than traditional citation indices to say, okay, here's the University of Cologne. I don't know anything about this university. I don't know who has cited the most there or who has the most supported work. And so this, allows me to kind of quickly look at that and then stay on top of that if I'm an administrator as well. And so this is, again, the total number of articles. And if you go down there, you can quickly see, who has published the most there. And so maybe this is, a tenured professor there or emeritus professor. And then once this larger table loads, you can quickly see, what is the most supported work and what is the most supported work in the last couple of years and things like this. And so I think we can complement and add to, different ways of looking at these universities, and maybe just that can improve rankings in different ways, and really just provide more nuance. And so I think, there's a lot of potential there. And I'd say we've only kind of just started at looking at, how universities have been cited, as well as how people have been cited. And I think one thing that we can also do is not just show how universities have cited, but how the citations go outward, right? So or is there more critical research or just more supporting research coming out of university, things like this. Any other questions in the chat or feedback? Also, if anything's unclear, or Dom, if I missed anything, feel free to chime in with stuff.
I think you're, yeah, anyone who has questions.
Thank you. So here's another question, and thanks, Alexis, for the question. It's nice. I do appreciate them. So can Scite filter institutions by topic, i.e. most supported universities in higher education? So this is a good question, and it's actually one we had recently. And so we can't do that now, but we can do that. So we actually have the data by looking at different subjects. And really, we've kind of paused on trying to do too much because we're a very small team and we don't want to overload the system with 20 million things that you can do with Scite. But I think this has come up repeatedly and is maybe something that we can expose more certain to say, okay, here's the most supported university in social sciences or in psychology or in experimental psychology. And so we do have subject areas, and we can obviously pretty much easily pair that with affiliations and show that. And so maybe this is something that we can do. We can also create subject dashboards, which is the initial idea that we had to say, okay, here is cancer research, or here is any kind of field and organize it by topic. And so this data we have, and we actually have ingested and have in the backend. We just haven't made it really available to users, but it is on our to-do as we start to expand out and not try to do too much at once. And so I'll take a note of that and say thanks.
Well, one thing I'd add to qualify that is that we regularly work with researchers and other people who want to do certain types of bibliometrics or citation analysis projects. And like that's something we could easily do, as Josh mentioned, because we have the data for it. So, if that's something interesting to you, we could help you out with that. So yeah, it's something where, we don't have product built for it necessarily, but we do have people regularly asking us these kinds of questions for us to do an analysis or give data for. So.
I should say immediately after this call, there's also a Financial Times slow hackathon that we will be jumping onto, which is looking specifically at that. So trying to look at different ways of looking at business schools and different ways that these can be ranked. So I don't think Scite is the only way that, or the only way that we can, or the only way that we should start to look at universities. But I do think it adds, this data point that can really help enrich these things beyond just total count. And so we're going to start to look at that, immediately after this call. And I think we can start to expose this and enhance this, for users individually with these dashboards as well. Thanks again for the questions. It's nice not to just have me talk at you the whole time. If anyone else has any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or just turn on your mic and you can also ask them. Also, input or feedback onto things that you'd like to see built is also very relevant. Thanks, George, for the nice words. So here's another one. Have you tried to validate the supporting contrasting classification across full text publications of different areas, including those from social sciences, humanities? And so we have validated it in different ways. So we have this holdout set of roughly 10,000 articles. And it's not looking at the full text citations of those 10,000 articles. It's looking at citation statements from those 10,000 articles. But those are from a diversity of different disciplines. And we try to have this sampling be as representative of the literature as possible. And so those have been manually annotated by at least 2 different experts. And that has, that's our holdout set where we test the deep learning model against this. And so this is a limitation of our system where some, articles have been supported or contrasted, and we don't capture that in the statement. And in some cases, we've added an extra sentence from other parts to make that clear. But in other cases, we'll just simply miss that, right? And so this is not the end all be all for looking at has this article been supported, but I think it's a great first step and does provide, in most cases, a way to look at how has this article been cited. And I think, this can expand to larger parts as we go perhaps down the line.
I think, again, one more thing that I don't think Josh showed is we have sort of an ongoing process of this where where researchers do flag something they might think is misclassified. And so, we have this ongoing process of engagement with researchers about this validation and stuff. So we'll get feedback, depending on what researchers are saying and so on.
Yeah, so here is what Dom is highlighting. So next to each citation statement, we show the confidence that the model has, and then we allow users to flag it and say, this doesn't look like it's supporting, it actually looks like it's mentioning. This is then brought to us on the back end and looked at by 2 different experts and accepted or rejected. And you can leave a note. You can also say, this is contrasting and here's how it's contrasting. It needs to be obvious, for someone reading this to be able to look at that. If it is changed, it then becomes expert classified here in that system. So this is important because it's a mixture of, this deep learning model doing it, which is quite good, but not perfect. And then, this human network where researchers can look at their article. And oftentimes when you show Scite to researchers, they generally look at their own work, and then they look at work that they know or think to be bad. And so it's important to have this feedback mechanism to kind of round that out, if you will. Thanks everyone for the nice words in the chat, by the way. Okay, if there's nothing else, I'll say, thanks once again. And again, feel free to email us afterwards if questions or feedback comes to mind. And we listen, we make improvements pretty quickly. We are a very small team. And I think, Scite has improved a lot because we listen. So really, if you do have questions on things that are unclear or that we could do better or explain, feel free to let us know via email at hi@scite.ai. And I would say, thanks everyone for taking the time out of your day to join, yet another Zoom call. I'm glad you guys have found it interesting, and we do appreciate the questions a lot. So one more. Perfect. Okay, so if that's it, I will stop the webinar now. And yeah, thanks so much, everyone. Have a good one.
Bye.
Okay.